Well, welcome to Inspired Caring, Allison O'Shea. We're so delighted to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here as well.
I think that I was looking at your website and the work that you are doing and you are creating in the world is so incredibly valuable. So I really hope that people have their antennas up as we are having this conversation, um, because aging is complicated. I think it's one of the most complicated things that we do, and you are an aging advisor. So let's
Mm.
talk about like your background a little bit so we have an idea how you passionately pour yourself into this work, where that came from, and then what is an aging advisor?
Great. Yes. Thank you. So 20 years ago, I got a degree in something called therapeutic recreation. And I, of course, thought I wanted to work with children. I was not guided toward that way, which was probably a good thing. But I started working as an activity director in memory care. And I realized, wow, there was a whole, not only, you know, I loved what I did, but there's a whole business, around seniors and aging. And so I quickly grew into an executive director within senior living and spent 18 years witnessing thousands of family journeys, witnessing thousands of aging journeys, and how some people really had lost control because conversations hadn't been had. Families, all of a sudden were having to come in and help mom and dad because they couldn't stay at home anymore. And it just created a lot of tension. I really thought for many years crisis was normal. I lived in a world where, that's what we saw. And it was probably halfway through my career that I thought, oh, there's
Mhm.
probably some conversations or just talks we can be having that could help us make sure to avoid crisis or get ourselves into a better position so we're not creating crisis for our families, because that's what ultimately happens when we don't talk about aging as an aging individual. And so as an aging advisor, so I started Openly Aging in January of 2022, with the ultimate goal of getting ahead. Really sitting with families and saying, okay, what do the finances look like? What does the support system look like? Are they local? If they're not, we need to talk about that. Where are we currently living? Does this make sense to age in? Or is this a place that really, it may work for now, but we just have to be prepared that it may not really age well with us. And
Mhm.
so just having these big conversations where they can just be prepared for the future, at least thinking about what their options are. I saw a lot of individuals who would call our community. My sales directors would get calls at least once a week saying, "Oh, do you all take, health insurance?" And not only are we private pay, but the communities I worked at, we were $10,000 a month, easy.
Mhm.
And the silence on the phone because the hospital or rehab is saying, "Mom can't go home. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was this expensive. I thought it was covered by insurance, and I don't even know how much money mom has." And so all of a sudden, you're having to make some really big, expensive decisions when you don't even really know what your options are. So I want people to know what their options are way before they need to know, so they're educated consumers. So when things come up, oh, I learned about that. I know how much that costs. I know how that business model works. And we already decided as a family that's not something we want to venture into. We want to go on this route, and we're educated to know that that's what we want. And
It's
so
such a
that's the goal.
yes, it's such a proactive approach.
Yes.
And I think that so many, I appreciated what you just said, that we've sort of normalized crisis. And I feel like that's part of
Mhm.
our broken ecosystem of long-term care services that people deny. I asked a local gerontologist, actually, she's a geriatric physician, geriatrician. And I asked her, what is our biggest challenge with aging? And she said, denial.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I
Yep.
find that I love, so I love Openly Aging.
That's where it comes from. And my logo is an elephant because it's the elephant in the room. We've got to talk about it. I'm older now than when we started this conversation 2 minutes ago. There's
Yeah.
no denying it. And one of the biggest things I also in my work, I do a lot of public speaking, and it's all on aging empowerment. We can't stop aging, but we can also keep our dignity and control in it, but we've just got to acknowledge it's happening. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people will fall and they won't tell their children. Well, if we fall, that should elicit a whole protocol that we should do to make sure we're not falling again and that we stay healthy and there's no shame in falling. It can happen to anybody. But as we
Mhm.
get older, we need to realize that we need to be a little more proactive. If something happens, we got to jump on it. Any diagnosis, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I think part of it is the not just the shame, but the fear of what it means if you fall,
Mhm.
or the fear
Yep,
of what it means if we have this conversation.
yep.
How do you help people like navigate around being afraid?
And that's a big piece of it. And I think part of the fear is the unknown. So that's
Mm,
also why the education piece is really important. And that's what I tell clients, when I'm working with my private clients and I say to them, we're not making any decisions today. We're
mm,
not talking that you got to move out of your house tomorrow, a year, or 2 years. That's not what we're talking about. We're just saying here are the red flags with if aging occurs and things are getting harder, this is why this situation may not work anymore, but we can make it work if that's what you want. You just need to be educated on how much that costs, how to do it,
mhm,
and all that stuff. So I think if we can get more education out there on what services are out there, how to use them, help take away the shame, then the fear will, because most people don't also talk about aging because of fear of money. They don't think they have enough money. And I actually think one of the biggest issues we have is we don't talk about money. And then all of a sudden, we thought we could afford things and we can't. But we're in this middle ground where we can't afford the high cost of caregivers, assisted living, but we don't make enough for Medicaid or any kind of state, or we make too much, right? And
mhm.
people don't realize what that threshold is. And so we should know how our finances fit into the aging world way before. Um, so we can protect ourselves or use our money in the best way possible to keep ourselves independent.
And there's so much misconception about what Medicare will and will not pay for,
Oh,
and with I mean, that's just like a whole nother world.
and then Medicaid, people don't understand Medicaid and, oh, well, once mom needs assisted living, she'll be on Medicaid. Well, I've worked with clients who they make like $40 too much,
Mm,
and what do you do? But you should know that way ahead. We're also coming up on this generation. There's a lot of Vietnam veterans. That was a
mhm.
draft. So there's a lot of people that are eligible for benefits that they don't even know about. And so I help people identify that and see if there's any, it's called Veterans Aid and Attendance, and that can
Mm.
help pay for care. But you've got to know if you're even eligible for it or not.
Right. How do you mentioned in your work becoming an aging ally. So for
Yeah.
the adult children that are listening right now, how do we become better aging allies if our parents are denying kind of where things are, they're feeling afraid, but we want to help get them the tools and resources that they need?
So the first thing I always tell people is your parents or your loved one's aging journey is not your aging journey. So
Um,
sometimes we get caught up, especially as adult children, like, Mom, just do this. Like, why are you being so difficult? Well, her life is not your life, and your expectation of how you're going to age is probably going to be different than how your mom or dad choose to age for whatever reason. Denial comes from a lot of places. It's generational. It can
mhm,
be from trauma. It can be from, just how somebody copes in the world. And so we can't put our own expectations of awareness. But what we can do is just approach them in a way that is not I have found in my career in senior living and even now, we got to not be bossy children.
mm,
We've got to allow our parent to have the dignity of somebody who raised us. Of now, once again, I'm going to say it a lot. Just because they're not doing it the way we want them to do it doesn't mean it's wrong. So it's taking little steps. It's taking little bites. One of the big things, I always tell people is start with my book. I know we're going to talk about my book, but it's just getting them educated without you being the educator at first. Just having them start just talking about aging in a very small doses. Hey, mom and dad, do you have your documents? Do you have a will? Do you have a power of attorney? And, that's an easy yes or no
Mhm.
question. And then that's an easy nugget to say, okay, well, why don't we go talk to an estate planning attorney? I want to make sure that, your finances are protected, or that I understand exactly how you want, who you want to make decisions. So it's taking little nuggets at a time and just doing it in a way where they stay in control. So my ultimate goal is to make sure our aging parents, our aging loved ones continue to have their dignity, can keep control of their aging journey, which only will help aging allies feel better through the process and be able to support in a way that they know is exactly how their aging loved one wants to age to the best of their ability. It's all very unpredictable, as we know, but
Well, it's unpredictable and there's no one way, right?
That's the biggest piece of it. I always tell people when I do my talks is, you know, just because the neighbor had a bad experience with home care, you can't mark that home care isn't the right choice for you maybe one day in your future, because everyone's situation, one of my taglines is aging is universal, but your situation is 100% unique to you.
Mhm.
Nobody has the same combination of health issues, money, support system, social engagement needs. Nobody has that same combination. And so knowing your unique situation is how you empower yourself to age grace, the best way possible with your aging allies there to help support and make sure it happens.
That's so great. I think it can avoid people are not just avoid a crisis, but avoid the fallout of a family.
Oh, because especially when you have siblings who may also view, when I work with clients too, I always say, okay, we have to acknowledge how everybody on this call views aging, because everybody has a different opinion about aging. They have a different expectation about aging. They have their own biases that they're bringing to the table. And so understanding. So yes, it can get very
Mhm.
complicated when we have a lot of family members kind of involved in these decisions. And yes, aging is unpredictable, like I said. So why don't we take care of the things that we can? So when the unpredictable stuff happens, it's not this huge crisis. It's just, oh, all right, well, I thought maybe this could happen. And we've kind of already talked about it a little bit. And so taking care of the stuff that isn't predictable, that we actually can know black and white about.
Yeah, I mean, namely, we are getting older.
Yes, yes.
Black and
Can't
white.
stop it. Can't stop it.
Cannot stop it. One of the gifts my mom gave to our family was she thought through, and we did an episode on this, what her scenarios would be if
Yes,
certain things happened.
yes. I
Yeah.
call those triggers.
Mm.
So in my book, I talk about, because that is where the unpredictable piece comes from, and then that's also where caregivers all of a sudden experience burnout, because that one doctor's appointment a month slowly creeps into four doctor's appointments a month, five doctors, and they're taking off work, or all of a sudden mom isn't making meals the best way. So she's not as healthy as she could be. So now we're all of a sudden bringing mom meals. And it's like this slowly creeping caregiver where that's all of a sudden we're in it and we're so deep in it. Now we're just surviving. And so what
Mhm.
I do with families is help identify triggers. And it could be, hey, we'll do home care at home, mom, for you, but due to your finances, when it gets to be $10,000 a month, it is going to be cheaper to go to assisted living. And this one around the corner will fit our budget. Or,
Mm.
hey, mom, my career's really busy. I have all these kids. If four doctor's appointments, if it becomes more than four doctor's appointments, I'm going to need some support for that. We're going to probably have to hire somebody out, or that's the trigger, to move if need be. So it's just helping families identify where are our triggers, where are our, breaking points. Because one of the biggest things too, as caregivers, is it is not your responsibility to put your health in a compromised situation, sacrifice your time with the family that you've created, money, be responsible for paying for mom and dad. If you make those choices in an educated way, that, yeah, I'm okay with paying for mom for this, or, you know, maybe quitting my job and kind of being whatever. If you
Mhm.
go into it educated, then that's different. But we shouldn't just feel this like obligation when, if we had talked about some of these things before, they wouldn't feel like an obligation. We would have felt like, okay, I'm making this choice to be this for my mom, or I'm telling my mom, here's where my boundary is. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. But when it comes to this piece, I need you to know I'm going to outsource it, or I'm going to need support. And so it's just those honest conversations
Mhm.
just help with the health of a family.
And it really helps people avoid the crisis.
Yes, yes. And the
Yeah.
resentment and the anger and the fighting and all the things that, when I think of my last chapter of life, and we never know when that is, but hopefully, I plan to live to 100, but in a healthy way.
Mhm.
Hopefully it's then I want to live that part of my life with contentment, with joy, with gratitude, and not stressing my whole family out. but
Yes.
also but also just being angry or resentful because I've lost all control, and my adult daughter has to come in and make decisions, and I'm mad at her, she's mad at me, and it just sets ourselves up for just a not the aging journey that I want, you know.
Well, and that, I mean, is really the perfect lead in, because you go into these caregiver support groups on Facebook and people say, I will never do this to my
Mhm,
children. I
mhm.
never want this to happen to me. But there's no, and it's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then there's no follow up, right?
Exactly.
On how,
Right.
and I feel like
How do
that's
you
your
how do you
book.
make that not happen? Yeah.
Right. And I think that is your book, Openly Aging: Four
Yes.
Pillars to Keep Control of Your Aging Journey.
Yes.
So let's talk about that and talk about what those pillars are.
So being, in senior living, I was a witness, obviously, like I said, to all the aging journeys, but I also saw all the services, and all the
Mhm.
options that people had. We were just one option, essentially. Every crisis I saw fit into one of the pillars that I describe in my book. And so those pillars are support system.
Mhm.
Either there was no support system nearby, mom and dad refuse to move anywhere, um or they have a good support system local. That's great. So it's knowing where that aging support system is. And for some people, they might not have an aging support system. Maybe they didn't have children. Maybe the children that they do have aren't in a place that they're able to help them if they need it. So making sure we identify who that aging support system will be. And the catch is, it can't be your friends. They could be your
Mm.
friend. It could be now be your friends if you're a healthy, retired individual, of course. But there may come a time where all those friends are going to need a support system as well. So it's just preparing for, where is that support system.
And
The
that
next,
really speaks to having an intergenerational life.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
100%. And communicating and saying, hey, are you okay to be this support system? And that's how that conversation starts. Because then
Mm.
that a person, that adult daughter, adult son can say, okay, well, what does that mean to you? You know, because if
Mhm.
this means I'm dropping everything because you want to stay at home and not ever, get support outside, that's not going to work for me. So it just helps us start that conversation of what that support system, or do you need to be educated on what a professional support system is?
Mm.
I listened to a few episodes of your podcast, so I'm not sure if you've had it before, but like geriatric care managers, patient advocates are huge, big parts of some people's aging journeys. Well, you should know you need those professionals way before you actually use them. Um, they're, most of the time they're social workers or nurses.
Mhm.
And they're, boots on the ground. They're basically like an adult child, but they're professional. But because they're social workers and nurses, they're like, 125 to 175 an hour. And you don't use them for care. But if you need somebody
Mhm.
to go to the doctor's appointment, well, it will be cheaper in the long run if you need somebody to start using their service when it's appropriate, in small increments, so they get to know you. They notice any changes. They're there as your advocate way before. Because the last thing you want is for them to have to come in and save the day. And that's what happens a lot of times, is you're in the hospital. All of a sudden the hospital's like, oh my gosh, this person has nobody to help
Mhm.
support them. And we got to get them in a care manager. And then it just becomes a big thing. So, where's your support system? Do you need a professional support system?
I
The
love
next
that.
one, yeah. The next one is home. Does it make sense where we're at long term? Once again, not today, not today. And if you're in the house you raised your kids in and been there for 50, 60 years, we have big conversations about that.
Mhm.
There's no right or wrong answer. You can stay, but you need to know what that choice means and what that could mean, you know? Um, and a lot of people I hear, well, I don't have a mortgage. Why would I move, to have, yeah, but how much is it to upkeep this 2,500 square foot home, this 3,000 square foot home? Does that counteract, having a mortgage? And are you getting the social engagement you need, which is the next pillar?
Yeah, that's a big one. Really
Yeah.
quick pausing on
Yeah.
home. I think also in the book, How to Say It to Seniors, the author talks about his mom refusing to move out of the home. And he finally, it like clicked with him, okay, if you don't want to move based on the current status quo, here's what we're going to need to do to the house to make it
Mhm.
work for you. And this is how much it's going to cost, right?
Mhm.
So factoring that in as part of the equation when you're really looking at that and making those decisions.
100%. And that, and it's education,
Mhm.
and that's from an aging ally, the best thing you could do, just like that person did, that author, is all you can do is educate. How they take that education is, but most people are pretty rational unless there's dementia. Now, and I always tell families too, if somebody is really refusing and not making the best choices for themselves, even after you present all the rational choices, then yeah, there might be a reason now to, like, let's go to the doctor, because that is a dementia of some sort that's kind of being, could be masked a lot of times. It doesn't mean that it's an official, oh my gosh, we're going down this dementia trail. It doesn't mean that, but there's something happening where even with rational things put in front of us that are for their health and for their well-being, they can't, see it.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a
That could
lot
be
of
that could be a sign of dementia that we don't see. And so it's just, there's little, things that we could get ahead of in that regard as well. But yeah.
avoid the crisis. Well, and I am a
Avoid,
big
yes.
yeah. I am a big proponent of staying home for as long as possible, and I am a huge proponent of senior living. So let's talk
Mhm.
about socialization, because people will say, well, I don't want to live with the old people and I want to stay home and I don't like people that much. And yes, and help us fill in the blank.
Yes. So why I mentioned the degree I got and started in programming is because my degree allows me to really see social engagement as in a different way. I have basically a degree in social engagement, therapeutic recreation. So the way I look at social engagement, I find it to be one of the most important things we need to acknowledge as we age, but we need to understand how we socially engage, like you
Mhm.
just said. Even introverts need people. And so what I tell people is staying home is great as long as, social engagement, and maybe you're involved in church, maybe got a lot of friends, that's great. But one of the big questions I ask is, what happens when you can't drive?
Mhm.
If driving becomes an issue and it stops you from being able to participate in all the things, what does that look like for you? Oh, for some people that's fine, I'll just stay home and not have social engagement. I said, that's fine. That's your choice, but you also can't put it on your children to be your constant social engagement. So it's these kind of conversations, we have. Or for others, that might be the trigger. That might be the trigger that it takes to say, okay, if there comes a time where I'm not comfortable driving, or I'm told I can't drive, because people drive way too long because of social engagement, they, probably longer than they should sometimes. And once again, my ultimate goal is, if they are educated in that choice, you have to let them be, make that choice. If somebody knows that their social engagement is going to decline rapidly if they are not able to drive, but they are still choosing to stay home, they can afford it. The family understand, they're going to get caregivers in, whatever that looks like. That's their choice. Is it the way I would want to, live my last days? Probably not, but that's okay. It all goes back to this. As long as people are educated and they know what their options are, it is still their choice, whether we understand it or not. For others, we have a big conversation about, extroverts to me. Whenever I meet one of my clients who's an extrovert, I'm like, listen, you need to realize that your health will be severely affected if you don't get your social engagement. So the minute your social engagement starts to decrease, and it could be because your friends are also getting older, it might not be you, but what if this group of friends you have all of a sudden is dwindling, dwindling, dwindling? That might be a time where looking at an independent living might be a good opportunity. There are a lot of social groups that are happening in certain areas. We have a group here called Silver Connections, and they all do lunch together, dinner together. It's like a membership program, and there's a lot of those happening. So just knowing how you recreate or how you socialize is the first step in that. And I talk about that in my book a lot. I break it down because also knowing one of the other, how you recreate, are you a purposeful recreator? Or are you a social recreator? The purposeful recreators are always like in charge of the group. They're always the organizers. If there's a meal train, they're the ones organizing it. If there's a women's club, they're the president or the vice president. Whereas social recreators love to recreate, but they love a card game, a book club. They're just more of, they'll be involved in everything, but they're not in charge necessarily of anything. And so knowing how you recreate is also important to set yourself up to be successful. Because if staying home is what you want to do, that's great. Let's get your social engagement set. Let's figure out how we can keep that social engagement the best it is.
I love it. Okay, so we have support systems,
Yep.
home,
Yep. Social engagement.
social engagement. What is our fourth pillar?
Supportive services. And these are anything where money is exchanged. And it could be cash, private pay, or it could be insurance. So knowing how business models work of any service that may come into your life throughout this journey. One of the biggest examples I always give is many people don't know the difference between home health and home care. And they get very confused. And I'm on a lot of like Facebook groups. And that's one of when I see somebody put out there, oh, I need a nurse, and they have United Healthcare. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you looking for exactly? Because home health, as you know, is covered by insurance, whereas home care is private pay. And so just understanding the business models and why would you need home care? Why would you consider home health? Knowing, why would you start physical therapy if you stumbled one time? Why would that be important? So understanding how much things cost, how you pay for them, and why you would use them in your future is very important. That's the education piece of just knowing what's out there.
This is my new favorite book.
Oh, yay!
This is so good. I think this is going to be a great gift to people in my life, in my world.
Yeah.
Because, we know 90% of people want to stay at home. And if you are the adult child to someone who is insisting that they want to stay home, this really sounds like the roadmap to have those conversations and to help your loved one with dignity, be self-reflective, and make a plan.
Yeah. And, as I've been doing this work, the word plan really stresses people out because when you think of plan, you think we have to do it. Like, okay, we put this plan in place, then we have to like go through it. And I really struggled at first because that was when my business came out. I'm like, oh, I'm going to help people do plans. And I wasn't getting anywhere. They're like, okay, we don't want a plan. Yeah. So I really
my children's my children's version of this is sign you up. Like I'm signing you up. I'm signing you up for pottery. I'm signing you up for soccer.
Right.
Don't sign me up.
Exactly. Because we want to fix it. We want to, oh, I want my mom to be active, so I'm going to take her to all these things. And well, have we really talked to mom? And it's okay if mom doesn't want to be that active, Because we also have to acknowledge as we age, there's depression. There's, we do get to a point in our life where for some people, sitting around and watching TV may be what they want to do, right now.
Mhm.
Is it the healthiest thing to do? Of course not if you talk to a doctor, but at the same time, it always goes back to if we're educated, we know what our options are, whatever we choose to do with those options is our choice. And
Yeah.
that's really the whole point. And that's what Aging Allies can do is just offer the education, offer the options, and then let mom and dad. Now, of course, that's a very black and white way to look at it. If there's dementia, if there's Parkinson's, there's a lot of things. But we probably had signs of those things a long time ago.
Mhm.
And us, even as aging allies, ignore them. And one of the things I write about in my book is the minute we notice a change in our parents or they notice a change, we want to always create an environment where they feel comfortable coming to us about it because we're not bossy. We're not dictating what they do. We're just been there to have kind of conversations. Is those should start a protocol.
Mhm.
If we're having problems with memory, we don't need to hide it. We need to say, Mom, I'm noticing this, because a lot of times adult children also don't bring it up. They don't know
Mhm.
how to, bring it up. Family dynamics are family dynamics, and they're
Yeah.
always going to be there, no matter how old or how the roles reverse a little bit.
And sometimes it's the adult children who are in denial. Like
Oh,
it's the adult children who are like, because I have heard so many people say, I've tried to talk to my kids about getting rid of the stuff or moving out of the house. And the kids are like, no, mom, it's too soon. You're not old enough.
I write about that in my book. Basically, like you do it. Find somebody else who will support you. And is that the best support system for you? If your daughter who's local can't hear you, maybe
Mm.
you need to talk with your son who's you fight for the aging journey you want. It doesn't matter if they don't want to hear you. You have a
Mm.
right to talk about it. You have a right to do what you want to do. So just because your adult daughter who's local has always been your go-to, if she can't hear you in this phase of life or this time period, then it's okay to find, somebody else that can hear you and support you. Because I hear that all the time. Well, every time I bring it up, they say, Mom, we don't want to talk about you dying. It's none, they don't have that right. They don't have
Right.
that right. And as all the caregivers listening, all the aging allies on this call is, you know, if you have parents that are wanting to talk about it, oh my gosh, what a blessing.
You've
You
just
should,
won the golden, you've got the golden ticket.
you've got the golden ticket. Take it and listen. Just listen and hear them. Yeah.
I love that. So what do you think is one of the biggest issues that we have?
I think one of the reasons education, for us to get educated as we move into this journey is really important because one of the biggest issues the industry has, us as consumers, I spent 20 years as an executive in senior living. So being on the other side, I saw it is unmet expectations.
Mm.
Consumers walk in and have all these expectations because they weren't educated. So they were sold by the salesperson on all the great things on why you should use this service, you should use our home care, you should come to our building, you should community, and then they get there and they have a lot of unmet expectations. But then from the other side of it, the industry side,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things their hands are tied with. There's a lot of things that are unrealistic that they will never be able to do because of staffing, because of finances, because of whatever. And so I really want to help bridge the gap between consumers' expectations and exactly what the businesses can do or can't do, and make sure that the consumer is educated to know, but also what they should expect. Because there are
Mhm.
things that the industry doesn't do well, or that, home care has a reputation for certain things. Well, how do you get the best out of, if home care requires 4 hours in order to get a caregiver, because that makes sense, to find a caregiver to come to your home for 1 hour a day is unrealistic. That's not going to
Mhm.
happen. So they have requirements, certain, 2 hours, 4 hours. Well, once the task is done and that caregiver is sitting on the couch, and the whole family's upset because you're here on their phone. Well, you need to have that, tell them what they could be doing. Could it be laundry? You've got to kind of guide it. But as a consumer, you just assume
Mhm.
that this young certified nursing assistant knows exactly what your expectations are. And that's, so kind of bridging that gap is also a really important part of the education that I provide to families.
Well, and I think it does go back to that control. We want to control as much as we can as we're aging, but then also within our lives. And I do feel genuinely as a family care partner, caretaker, caregiver, whatever, daughter, whatever the
Yeah.
term is you're using, just so that you feel connected to what I'm about to say, is sometimes we have to loosen our grip.
Yes.
Sometimes we're going to have to release just a little bit because there are so many unknowns. So if you have someone that's in your home that has helped with some sort of specific tasks that you know you needed them there for, what else can they do? Let's
Right.
get creative. Let's explore. Let's make a list of 50 things right now when you're not feeling stressed out about it. Maybe they can help you organize photos.
100%.
And boy, as a rec therapist,
Yes. That's perfect. And I help families kind of put lists together. Because the other thing too is when I ran the senior livings and I would have adult daughter or adult son come to me, oh my, like so upset because the blinds weren't open in mom's room, in the morning, which I get. We did have expectations at my community. You make the bed, you open blinds, you get the room. We called it daily tidies by 10 a.m. But, that's not going to happen every day. It's just the truth of the matter. And so I would have to have big conversations with, is your dad happy? Do you feel like your dad is enjoying the other residents, is being treated well? So sometimes it's almost like changing what we're looking at and seeing and acknowledging, okay, there's all these amazing things that are going on. I do
Mhm.
have to loosen my grip on a few of these others. It doesn't mean to totally let your expectations go by the wayside. That's not what I will ever promote or say. But I
Right.
do think there's times where we can maybe look at the bigger picture and say,
Yeah.
okay, you know, um, and it should also be a reason why you are proactive about your own aging journey. Because if you don't want to be in a memory care and assisted living, I do believe wholeheartedly that the more we do ahead of time makes our risk of needing higher level of care lower and lower and lower, because we're being proactive. We're getting services sooner than we maybe want them to help us. We're getting diagnoses. We're doing what we need to do to stay healthy, active, mobile.
I
And
mean,
that's how you stay out of higher level of care.
that is a mic drop moment. The
Yeah.
sooner you read this book, weave through interventions,
Mhm.
and get the help that you need in home, the longer you can stay at home, the
Yes.
healthier you're going to be.
Yes.
It's just a win-win-win. I
Yeah.
mean, circling back to expectations within the building, it's not Narnia. It's not this utopic
Oh,
society,
no,
inside our buildings. Like we
no.
are all, there's human beings living there,
Yes.
there's human beings working there. I do love the phrase, we work where people live, they don't live where we work.
Mhm.
I think that is with our teams a
Yep.
huge message. Um, but like I'm looking at my own messy house right now after the holidays. Like I didn't get my blinds open
Right.
today.
Exactly. Or we also, I used to get a lot of this piece of article of clothing needs to be hung up and they're putting it in the drawer. Well, we also have to understand, who are working in these buildings, are they getting their own personal clothes dry cleaned? Probably not. Are they going to five-star dining restaurants? We had a lot of expectations around food in these places, which is not wrong. It's just kind of understanding what our expectations are. So we also have to realize, and that's why I always tell families, you get to know those associates. You get, how many kids do they have? Who are they as people? And they will take such good care of your loved one if they feel valued and they feel like they're seen for who they are.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think there's also a very big discrepancy between those living and being able to afford $12,000 a month for a memory care and those working,
Mhm.
in a memory care. And so understanding how those two worlds are different, but also where can we bridge that gap and how can we make those relationships strong?
I love that because bottom line is we're human, right? Everybody wants to
Yes.
be treated with kindness and respect and dignity.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, this is exciting that we have connected, and
Yeah.
thank you for coming on and sharing all of this great wisdom. There's so many great takeaways, and I
Thank you.
think the number one takeaway is go buy the book,
Yes.
Openly Aging: 4 Pillars to Keep Control of Your Aging Journey. And even if you are the aging ally, the adult child, this can help you with those conversations
100%.
to
Yep.
have with your parents. So,
And I
any
think
final
it's
words? Oh, go ahead, Allison.
well, it's okay. It's also because the way it speaks to, it'll also give you the language to speak to your parents, in the way that they'll hear it. Because it's written for them. So if you read it, it'll help you understand, some of the things they're dealing with.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Any final words for people as we close out this conversation, but start up a new year? We are recording in January, so just any final words of wisdom.
Yes. Helping our parents or our loved ones not feel the shame of aging.
Mm,
I really want that's the whole openly aging is we cannot avoid aging. And so having little conversations, being there to support, gone are the days of these big sit down talks with everybody and we discuss mom and dad and their, what they need to do. It's having, a time over coffee and saying, "Hey mom, have you gone to an estate planning attorney? How can I help you? What can I
mhm.
help you with? Um, what are your fears? Let's talk." I think that's the biggest takeaway. We need to start having better conversations that actually have produce action.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.